G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie-David. I run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, where we help property investors start out and scale up their property portfolios. Yes, we help property investors, but we also help a number of first home buyers get into the market. And with a lot of the government changes that have come out this year, a lot of the schemes that have been launched, I find that first home buyers are back in their droves. And I think that's super, super exciting for people to get into the market, whether it's a stepping stone property, whether it's a home they can see themselves living in with their family. I think the great Australian dream should be alive and well. And I'm very, very fortunate that we get to work with a lot of Australian families on that front as well. So that leads me to introducing our guests for today. And just before we do kick off, I want to make a note that this discussion is general in nature and not intended to give advice. So if you do need advice, please seek out a professional to do so. Chris Ferris from Coposit, mate, welcome onto the show.
Thank you, Aaron. It's great to be here.
Mate, I think it's fantastic. I've seen what you guys are doing. We had a chance to have a chat earlier. And I said, this is exciting. And almost to the point that I'm like, how come we don't know about it? How come a lot of our first-time, even I won't say first-time buyers and investors, how about a lot of our clients don't actually know about Coposit? So I want to come to what you guys do and how you do that in a minute, but rewind a little bit because I found out you got your hands full.
I do.
From a family perspective, so I'm very curious and keen to hear Chris Ferris, the personal, professional story as well in a nutshell.
Yeah, look, personally, I think as we were talking about, I'm very, very busy personally. 4 kids, beautiful wife. That keeps me definitely busy on the personal front.
Yeah.
Growing up, my mum and my dad's an immigrant from overseas.
Yep.
Worked extremely hard as a plumber.
Yeah.
We were, myself and my brother, really always on site, working with him. Getting our hands dirty.
Beautiful.
I had my first real investing experience with my grandfather, actually, at the age of 14.
Nice.
We started investing, or he got me into starting to invest in shares, really getting that investment mindset. Wow. It's really interesting, actually. The very first share that I got into actually made 100% gain. Yeah. And the next share that we got into actually made 100% loss. So that was a really interesting time. So I had a really good lessons at the age of 14 and 15. But I suppose personally for me growing up, there's always, we had a great childhood. But it was always fairly difficult for our dad and my mum to get ahead. And I suppose they gave us a great platform to be able to change, make great change in the industry.
It's got to be hard for parents. Immigrant families ourselves, and it's going to be hard to pick up. Can you imagine picking up your kids now, moving to another country, and you don't speak the language or you're not fluent in it? Correct. And starting again, like that blows my mind sometimes. I'm like, I'm so comfortable, man. I think that's maybe the decision that
you've hit the nail on the head.
And so where we're going to go to from here, possibly because Australia's the land of milk and honey. Yes. I don't care what anyone says. It's not America, mate. It's Australia. Yes. Lifestyle, social security, transport, weather, whatever you name it, good government, for example, regardless of which side of politics you sit on, it's a well-run country.
I'd have to agree with that, absolutely. And I think that is the difficult. I couldn't imagine picking up and not speaking the language, which was my dad, not speaking the language, meeting my mum, having kids, and, really gave us a great foundation to be able to do what we are doing now. Yeah. So, started off from a professional side of things, started out being an accountant. So, did my chartered accountant, did all the study, worked for Deloitte initially. And, myself, my brother then got into property development, always had a passion and a love for property.
Fantastic.
Lucky enough to get into the property market at the age of 20.
Well done.
Fortunately, the prices were a little bit different than they were today. They are today. Yeah. But still same challenges. And, one of those challenges was the deposit. Yeah. And that remains a challenge today. It's actually been a challenge since the 50s. My grandfather bought a property borrowing the money, and it was in pounds back then. And he had a personal loan to borrow the funds for the deposit. So this deposit issue has always been an issue and remains to be the issue for people getting into the market.
Correct. That is exactly, when I look at back in time, headlines from the 50s, 60s, you look at 80s, and now I'm like, we've evolved as a culture so much technology, but there's still some basics in our culture that we still haven't managed to address. And one of them is you want to buy a property, you need the deposit. And that is the number one barrier for people to get in. In fact, I'd say that we've got clients that have very, very good incomes. Yes. I'm talking 6-figure incomes plus. They're renting, for example, cost of living, and it's very hard to get ahead of the curve to save for a deposit. And by the time they're saving, property prices are now outpacing their savings. So what they can afford to get is now kind of their they're clutching at straws and trying to chase a little bit as well. So if we use that as kind of an intro, take us through how did that become, I guess, this is the pain point that you're trying to solve. How have you then come into the market with Coposit?
Yeah, look, absolutely. As you just mentioned, the actual pain point is the deposit barrier.
Yeah.
So often in the media we hear affordability is the issue, which it is an issue, absolutely. Yep. But the number one issue, before you can actually even consider. I'll jump in there.
Affordability is an issue, but then it's buy what you can afford is the antidote to that, right? Yes. But if you don't have the money to get into the market, you can't get in.
Well, that's before you can even consider affordability.
Yeah.
You need to figure out the deposit factor.
Yeah.
And now, particularly in New South Wales, the stamp duty aspect, the second barrier, the stamp duty aspect has been addressed to a degree. That deposit barrier has always been there.
Yeah.
And so, back when we were developing in 2017, 18, we were looking at a particular client. There was a property that we owned and they were looking to rent that property.
Yeah.
And they had a good income, household income, between the couple of 150,000, so really solid income.
Yeah.
And, it was an apartment at the time of $450 per week. And we said, look, happy to accept your rent application, but let's take it a step further. What's the barrier for you to enter the property market? And they just said the deposit. They've been in the country for 4 years. They just couldn't get to that saving level for the deposit. They get to 30, 40,000. The market moves, the goalposts change, the whole situation resets again.
Yeah.
Then we said, okay, look, we'll accept the rental application, but how about in our next project, we'll get you in, you can pay, I think it was about $3,000 per month for 24 months. They got to the end. They had accumulated their 10% deposit. Nice. They were able to settle and they got in and they came back to us and said, look, that was the easiest thing we'd ever done.
Wow.
And this was before, Coposit, the name didn't exist at that time. But, we really sat back and said, well, hold on a second, there's got to be a bigger application for this across the board. And when we started doing a lot of research into it, there's a massive application for this. And this is the primary barrier that we're trying to solve. At the moment, it takes the average Australian to save that deposit anywhere from 6 to 10 years.
Correct.
So we can either sit there and say, look, that's what it takes, 6 to 10 years, or we can try and disrupt it and change how it's being done currently.
Well done.
And that's exactly what we're doing.
A lot of first-time buyers are suffering in silence, and sometimes they're watching colleagues, friends, peers get into the market. And I'm privy to some of these conversations. Like, I don't understand. I'm on a good income, better than some of my friends, but they're able to get into the market. And I get to see it all, right? I'm in a fortunate position. I'm like, well, sometimes they've been given cash from family.
Yes.
That's one option. Sometimes it's an inheritance from a grandparent or a family member. Okay, that's out of your control. Sometimes it's a family guarantee.
Yes.
And again, that is family and money. So it's property, for example, that works for some families. It doesn't work for others because some parents go, look, I don't want to risk my home, and that's how they think it works. Or straight up, the children don't want to lean on their parents for that either. So if you don't have these options, or you can't, I don't know, some banks don't allow you to get personal loans for a deposit as much. So if you don't have those avenues open to you and you're renting, now you're caught in the rental trap, you're suffering silence. It's got to hurt, and it hurts confidence as well because they just stop saving, they stop looking at properties, and now the belief is building up that I can't actually get into the market.
And they get to that point where they sometimes give up. And I think anyone that has, not even that's purchased, anyone that has the aspirations to purchase should be celebrated. That's a big thing just to have the aspiration. Yeah. And I think everyone out there knowing that it does take 6 to 10 years currently, hopefully that can provide some comfort to people. Yeah. The average age of a first home buyer is 38.
Correct.
So, and a lot of people don't know that. So I think knowing this and knowing that you don't need to be 20 and buying the first property. If you're in that fortunate position, great. It's great for a future retirement.
Yeah.
But I think having that aspiration is the first step. And the second step is obviously getting to that deposit, getting to that target, which is what we help you do.
Story, jump in and they hear you and you said that you bought a property when you're like 20.
Yep.
There we go. I think I was mid-20s thereabouts, and kind of out of uni. My dad was like, get into the property, get into the market, for example. And sometimes when it comes from parents, you don't listen. Yes. That's the other part. When it's like your parents are telling you to do something, you do the exact opposite. But yeah, they'll go back and say, look, well, property prices were 450 then, or 350,000, for example, or interest rates were there and the debt to income ratio is different. It's like every generation, to go back to this, every generation has had their own unique challenges. Our grandparents were certainly not on the median incomes that we are on today. Yeah, sure. And the property prices have changed. But I think I'd go back to property prices as a reflection of the country that we live in and where we live. And yeah, if you want to live regionally, then you will forego some mod cons that you have when you live in the metro areas as well, right?
Even some employment opportunities as well.
Yeah, correct. Social, your community, your friend network, for example, that all changes as a price we had. But going back to Coposit, so you're solving this issue, which is the saving for a deposit. The question then is, how does this work?
Of course.
Yeah, perfect mechanics.
So I suppose really simple, Coposit is a revolutionary payment platform. And what we do is instead of needing that full 10% deposit upfront for new properties, we break that down. So instead of needing, if you're buying $1 million property, to give you a live example, you traditionally need $100,000.
Yeah.
You put that in a trust account with the developer or the solicitor, and you secure that property, and it doesn't settle for another sometimes 18 months, sometimes 2 years.
Ours, I think, took 3 years.
There you go. So it's 3 years. So for house and land, off the plan, apartments, townhouses, instead of needing that full 10%, you only need a $10,000 deposit. And you pay the balance of that deposit, the 10%, in weekly installments up until the settlement point.
Okay.
So you're utilising that time during construction, which has never been, I suppose, allowed to be used in the past, to break down the deposit barrier. So really importantly as well, it's not a micro deposit scheme. It's still getting you to a great equity position come settlement.
Yeah.
But it's making sure that you can utilise the time during construction to actually secure a property in a very different way. And I suppose looking at the market, a lot of first-time buyers are looking towards off-the-plan and house and land packages. They're not looking at existing stock because particularly in Sydney and metro areas, you're talking 1.5 to plus properties, which is not really the first-home buyer market.
Yeah, that's right.
So really, we've seen a great success and a lot of people coming onto the platform, from first-home buyers to investors to downsizers to divorcees who, 45 years old, starting again, having to start that savings plan again, looking at Coposit as their way back into the property market.
Yeah.
Locking in the property in today's prices and paying the balance of the deposit in tomorrow's prices.
How good's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny that, because I hear that and I think, we had this chat, but I'm like, so are you a fintech? And you're like, no, we're a prop tech. I'm like, that's interesting because we have this belief that we're not in the loan business, we're in the home business as a mortgage broker. I'm like, there's no loan without a property. And same thing, we're not a fintech, we're a prop tech business because we're in the property business. Is that the part of the ethos that you?
That's part of the ethos for us, and we're not a financial product. And the main aspect to that is there's two options now when you buy off the plan. You've got Coposit or the traditional 10% deposit.
Yeah.
If you pick either option, particularly with Coposit, there are no costs to the consumer at all to use Coposit.
Right.
So the decision-making process is, do I put $100,000 or $80,000 down now, or do I spread that over a series of weekly payments? So that's why we're getting great traction, because from the purchaser side of the equation, it's a no-brainer because there's no additional cost for them to use it, and they're able to cash flow themselves out. Yeah. Particularly important, where interest rates are heading at the moment, keeping that surplus cash that you may have, on an offset account or earning interest or, able for your cost of living expenses, which are going through the roof, is really important right now. People are looking at their cash flows.
Correct. Even from a first home buyer perspective, let's play this out, because a lot of them go, well, I put my deposit there, but then we also need some money left over for like when we move in. It's like the rainy day fund, or we've been told to kind of have 3 or 6 months cash in bank, and they're trying to save for that, but then all their cash has gone out. But this is almost getting first home buyers conditioned to making repayments, for example, and then having that management of funds to go, well, park your rainy day funds here. You're paying off your deposit, for example, which is almost akin to making your mortgage payments. It's getting you into this habit as well, which has got to go a long way.
It's getting them future ready for the mortgage process. They're buying a property at some point, there's going to be a mortgage in place. Yeah. And, getting them ready for that, making payments, weekly payments, getting them ready for that future mortgage, getting them accustomed to that is actually really quite important. And on the flip side comes settlement. And you'll probably appreciate this. A lot of the finance partners and banks are really loving the Coposit model because it's showing the discipline of savings. Totally. And banks are treating it now, they're looking at this as a genuine savings product, which is really special. So, it's good news all around, particularly for the purchase. They are the ultimate winners. And we tell our developer and real estate agent clients that, yes, it's a product for yourselves, but this is made around the customers and the purchasers to be able to help them get into the property market and break down those barriers in a really different way.
Yeah. So, I'm looking at it sounds like a no-brainer. So what take-up wise is the issue around, because they need a 10% deposit, and I say developers generally need a 10% deposit to show the bank they've got the pre-sales.
Correct.
How does that work from Coposit's perspective if the developer's a partner with yourselves?
Yeah, and I suppose that's within the team, we always talk about this point that we're changing the game for financiers and developers. And the purchasers, down the track when Coposit is the way you buy off the plan and the 10% days are dead, which we're confident we can break, they won't even know what we've managed to change for them.
Yeah.
And the financiers and the developers, the uptake, it's been great to date. And that's what we spent the last year building, 25 projects live onto the platform now across Queensland, New South Wales and ACT and Victoria.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the change that we're making for developers. The financiers are accepting levels of Coposit towards their qualifying pre-sales.
Okay.
Which is really important for the developers.
That is a real game changer.
That's a game changer, absolutely. I mean, if from the developer side of things, they really do need portions to count towards their qualifying pre-sales. Some developers don't, some developers do.
Yeah.
And we take that battle for them. We're speaking with the top fours, we're speaking with the non-bank lenders, we are speaking with them to get them across the Coposit product. And we've had some fantastic feedback. There has not been a financier to date that has said, we're not looking at this, because they know that this is the way forward. There's actually a trend in the market where, we're heading towards lower deposit models, which is quite dangerous for the financiers. So they're looking at this as an option to maintain the 10% deposit risk component.
Yeah.
And making sure that clients still getting to that high deposit point come settlement.
Fantastic. Very good. And I guess when you talk about the platform, for example, we'll include details to the website so you want to check them out. Then you've got your app, for example.
Yes.
So there are projects and developments that you then are showcasing online which are on your website. So if I'm a first home buyer looking to buy in a certain part of New South Wales, there are select properties that are now Coposit linked.
So in terms of the platform as well, you can download it in the Apple or Google Play Store.
Yeah.
It's similar to a marketplace. You can search properties, find the projects, find the locations, whether it's house and land, townhouse or apartments. And I suppose what we're really encouraging is we're building this marketplace as we speak. There's developers coming on every day. We're projecting by the end of April, there's going to be about 55 projects live on the platform across the Eastern Seaboard. And really, if there's a purchaser out there that is looking to buy a property and wants to use the Coposit model, but the developer or the financier hasn't yet got us involved or has heard of us, tell them you want to buy with Coposit. That's the way we want to buy.
Yeah.
And they will come to us and we'll make sure that we get them onto the platform. We're not exclusive to any particular developer. We're making sure that we can have an open marketplace. So there's great selection of stock for clients to be able to purchase and pick the desired stock that they want.
Yeah, okay. All right, lovely. So success-wise, take me through maybe some case studies or some examples of feedback that you've had from clients, and how does this work
practically?
Yeah.
Look, it's extremely interesting. Look, we had a client, her name was Tanya. She was a school teacher. She bought up in New South Wales in Seven Hills. That was a $620,000 property.
Yeah.
And she was paying about $450 per week to get to her 10% deposit. And she just loved this because it was able to get into that 10% deposit target. And she actually told us that she wouldn't be able to purchase if it wasn't for Coposit.
Wow. Yeah,
and in that particular project, there was a market of 23% that had told us they would not have been able to purchase if it wasn't for Coposit. So that is a whole new market that we've created into these projects. And, that project is now all settled. Everyone is settled, moved into their properties.
Unreal.
So Tanya was really excited. We actually just spoke with her the other day.
Yeah.
There was a downsizer that, was looking to sell their property. They didn't want to sell it right now, so they saw Coposit as the model to cash flow themselves out and be able to sell the property at a better time in the market. So it gave them flexibility.
Yeah.
The investor story was really interesting. There was a guy that finished his PhD, so he spent 10 years studying.
Yeah.
And he went straight to a pretty high income, about $180,000, but had no deposit at all. So he looked at this and said, look, this is my way in without having to try and save for that deposit earlier, and he got in that particular way. But I think as well that the first home buyer story, we're seeing currently about 65% first home buyers across the platform.
Yeah, right.
And then the investors make up, a majority of the balance.
Well, it's a pretty good mix.
It's a strong mix. And, you naturally think the deposit, it's definitely a first home buyer product. And when we created it, we absolutely thought great for first home buyers. People are going to be able to get into the market. But we're slowly seeing more investors looking at the platform, savvy investors saying, you know what? Why should I be paying a full 10% deposit when actually no one gets the benefit of that 10% deposit sitting in trust in any case?
Correct.
So it's not like the developer gets that. Most developers don't get that. So it's really important that we're able to use that construction time for people to actually save for their deposit.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so where to next? What's in the pipeline for you guys?
So we're really building the platform out.
Yeah.
Creating great product in terms of the app, making sure that people are understanding the journey. I think there's a lot of an education part as well. We want to make sure that
with anything new, I guess there is that
education phase.
That education going, well, what's the catch, for example? And
yes.
Not that cynicism kind of rears its ugly head, but you kind of go, well, this is new. Then you've got to spend a fair amount of time educating.
Yes. Yeah, and look, the main question we do get is what's the catch? And the difficult answer that we have to give is there is no catch. If you can make it through the payment process, there is no catch. There's no costs. There's no charges to use Coposit for the clients. So, we charge a developer when a sale is made. So
that's you're running a business. So effectively, it's got to be where's the revenue coming from. That's from the developer side. But
centric to us is that the customers are getting the benefit. And if we're then charging the customers to use a Coposit platform, are they actually getting a benefit? That was the question that we asked. So, for us, it's important that we're getting people on this savings plan. If we're then to charge them, fees to use it, that's counterintuitive to what we're actually trying to achieve for these people to get into the property market and fast track their property buying process.
Well done.
Yeah. So future ahead for us, there's quite a few overseas locations that have reached out to us. We're not there yet by any means. We want to really tackle the Australian market. There's about 80,000 properties approved every year across the country that, we think can be available with Coposit. And, really we want to be the ones to be breaking the 10% deposit. There's no need for that 10% deposit anymore. There is a better way, and that way is Coposit.
Yeah. It's funny because we've got some team members of ours in the Philippines, and this is a similar model, I feel, is what they have in countries like the Philippines, where they're paying installments for their new property beforehand. So again, they don't really need the chunk of deposit. It's and they call it repayments.
Yes.
Like, what are you paying repayments on? There's no property, but it's effectively like this type of model.
So, correct. Yeah. There's a few locations very similar to that, but there's also, as you mentioned, there's locations where they actually pay 100% of the property price up until completion, and that's released.
Yeah, okay.
Very different to how it works here in Australia. But places like the UK, New Zealand, very similar to how we operate. And I suppose this story of the deposit is not unique to Australia.
Take Canada.
It's
very
global
similar
issue.
Markets, right? Canada, New Zealand, Australia, UK, parts of UK where property prices exploded, and it's like they have generational issues around home ownership, and this is exactly the central conversation about how people are going to get their foot into the market when they can't afford the deposit. Yeah, exactly.
We've got our head of sales is from the UK, and he jokes that the only way you can buy a property is when your parents die. And as sad as that is, we don't want Australia to head that way. So we want to buck those home ownership rates.
And what happens if your parents rented? And there are a number of parents that didn't buy, or life changes happened and they lost the home or separation, and so the kids don't actually have anything to inherit.
Yes.
And so, that's not a goal.
Look, it's not a goal, and look, buying property isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
It may not. People don't want to be tied to a particular location or different ambitions, but it is important. You'll realise as you get down the track, in your 40s and 50s and 60s, having that property, that base for retirement is super important. Yeah. And the sooner that people have, as I said, the aspiration, I think that's the first step, having the aspiration, and then figuring out how, and then looking, saving for that deposit, learning, and then actually cracking the market. It's a big process. It's a daunting process.
Yeah.
A lot of people get daunted by it.
Excellent. Well, I'm really happy that you've come on, and I feel like any small way that we can help raise not only the profile, but raise the awareness for buyers to go, there are options available to you. There are options around getting your foot into the market. You've just got to figure out what's your sweet spot. And I feel like this is one really, really good option for people that want to go down this pathway. Yep. And it's for new properties. I get it, but it's a chance to get into the market.
Yes.
And I think you're doing a wonderful job, mate. So congratulations on your success so far, and onwards and upwards, man. I wishing your team all the very best.
Much appreciated.
No dramas. If you want to find out about Coposit, we'll include details to Chris's team and their website as well, so you can check them out and figure out if this is an avenue that's going to help or be beneficial for you with your home buying aspirations as well. And mate, once again, thank you very much for being on here.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. That's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. If you found that helpful, excellent. Leave us a review, or better yet, drop us a line with some questions that you want answered as well. Until next time, take care.